A very warm welcome to everyone, and thank you, Nashra, for that very nice welcome. It's also very nice to see the audience. I know the weather outside is beautiful. I don't know if I would be indoors if the weather was like this outdoors, but it's nice to see you all here and also online. It's my great pleasure and privilege, I think, to introduce you to this panel of really brilliant women and Amar, who's also brilliant. And I will start my introductions by telling you a bit more about Amar. So Amar is the executive board member at the GovTech campus in Berlin, which I feel like many of you are already very acquainted with. If you're not acquainted with it, they do very cool things. They bring the private sector and the public sector together. And this is really a big topic in Germany. How do you digitize the state faster? So Amar really sits behind that kind of strategic position. Aside from this hat of Amar, Amar was also former CIO and Innovation Commissioner of Saarland. And he led IT strategy and policy. So very happy to have you here again this year, Amar. I am now happy to introduce you to Tamara, who is, so Tamara worked in the United States where she led open government data and digital service reform as a part of the California Governor Newsom's team. And in 2020, Tamara returned to Europe to serve in her home country, Montenegro, as Minister of Public Administration, Digital Society, and Media. And we're very happy to have you with us, Tamara, because we know you've been traveling all over the world, and you've really made a stop in Berlin for this, so thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Pooja.
The next person I would love to introduce you to is Yolanda. Yolanda is practice manager for the LAC in digital development at the World Bank, where she leads the team to advance digital agendas. Yolanda also led Mexico's national digital strategy and spearheaded the GovStack initiative at ITU. Yolanda is a force of her own, and I feel like no words of mine can describe exactly what Yolanda is, but I'm very happy that you also have a chance to meet her today. So welcome, Yolanda.
Thank you.
And last but not the least is Andrea. And I can go on about Andrea, but I will start with her introduction. So Andrea has worked in International Development Cooperation now for almost 20 years. She's also a former MPAR graduate. Most importantly, she leads the GovStack initiative at GIZ, and she is my boss, which means I will not ask her tough questions today. But welcome, Andrea. And to begin with, I thought it would be interesting. I always feel like the things with panels is we introduce speakers, but it's nice to also hear your voice about how you would introduce yourself, your journey, and most importantly, with this topic of digital public infrastructure, how do you feel like your work sits in with DPI? And maybe I start with Andrea.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Pooja, for the very nice introduction. My name is Andrea. I'm leading the GovStack initiative, as you just mentioned, from GIZ side, so the German contribution towards this initiative. I will tell you in a bit what we're actually doing. We are a multi-stakeholder initiative, like a true one. So we are actually the founding organizations of the GovStack initiative were the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, where Yolanda actually was working for it as the project lead. Then it's Estonia, it's the Foreign Ministry of Estonia, it's DIAL, the Digital Impact Alliance, and Germany, and implemented by GIZ on behalf of the Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. So what we do and why we actually are is like we came together as this bold vision, and this is what the Secretary General of the ITU, Doreen Bogdan-Martin, once said. She mentioned, like, with GovStack, we are having this bold vision in place. So what do we want? What do we aim for? It's like that we would like to enable all governments worldwide to build safe, inclusive, and efficient digital systems that serve for the people. So this is actually what we envision, and how are we going to implement this? So what we did is we came up with a global open source toolbox, which comes up with actually the prerequisites for governments to set up such architecture, such digital architecture that you can build digital systems in a safe and efficient way. So, and this is now consisting of 4 elements. One is like we're having specifications. This is actually, we're describing best practices in a modular system. So for ID, for payment, for registries, for many components that you need in digital governments, we came up with those specifications that you can quickly put into practice or in procurements at least. We're having a sandbox environment developed, so governments have a reference platform to test and play around with those modular components. that we came up with, as well as a lot of capacity development measures and I forgot one thing, a marketplace. So for solutions that are compliant to this GovStack approach. So I think also, yeah, this is a bit what the GovStack initiative is all about. And I think our role in the DPI ecosystem is very much that we're trying to be an honest broker or a neutral broker between governments on the one hand and on the other hand solution providers. So we're putting this and the demands and the offerings that we're having into best practices, into this modular system, the so-called building blocks, in order to have a better and easier way to build innovative architectures that are reusable and ideally interoperable at the end of the day. And so this is really the role that we would like to play, and by this we are spreading open standards and trying to liberate markets in this direction a bit more. So I think I stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea. You will hear a lot about GovStack, not just because we all work, most of us have some interaction with GovStack, we're very passionate about it. I will now maybe hand over to Amar to introduce himself and also talk about the DPI position.
Yeah, from my side also, thank you very much for building this great round and with this great panelists. And thank you also for the introduction. I think what would be interesting is to see that my background also has a couple of other stations which are relevant for what we are doing currently. So before being State Secretary, I've been CEO of a tech company in Germany, the biggest cybersecurity company. So I have some experience from bringing it from the private sector, and before I was a startup entrepreneur, so knowing the challenges how to bring innovative products to the market. And before I was a researcher, so at least I know what the how to pick up the most current research to get it into the market. And this is exactly what we do with GovTech Germany. So we believe that the relevant solutions are not going for the public sector especially are not going to be produced by having only the public sector sitting together and developing things. It's the only way to deal with that is to have a strong collaboration, a collaboration between public sector and the private sector, who have the resources to provide the most innovative solutions, but also collaborations on an international scale. This is exactly what you guys are also doing. So, and the GovTech Germany has been founded on a challenge which is, I think, it is not only German specific, but in Germany we have a real challenge with that, is bringing the different stakeholders who are in charge for public administration together. We have different levels. We have the state level, municipalities, we have a federal level, and all of them are developing their digital tools by their own. And this is something we have been doing for more than 30 years, and we just identified as responsible people for the digital infrastructure that this is something which is not sustainable. It's not going to give us a way forward to employ technologies like AI and others. All these need some kind of standardization, some kind of central platforms. And this is exactly what we started to do. We started in bringing the people together from both sides, and then we started building infrastructures. We are building, for instance, currently 2 platforms, one e-health platform as an operating platform, providing for hospitals an infrastructure, a common infrastructure that can be used, rather than building each of them their own infrastructure. And the second thing is that we're building the Deutschland platform, which is more or less an operating infrastructure to provide all the different services for the different entities and so on. And what we do is we use good examples like GovTech, GovStack, where you build just components that can be reused, and this is, I think, the basic idea you have. And what we do is we put them together and offer an operating platform so that people can really not only have some code pieces, but also a reliable infrastructure they can directly use, having a marketplace for services, not only for code, so really for services, to start with this. And the nice thing about the conversation today is to see what relevance such platforms have if you ask about a digital public infrastructure, where we also have, where we build as a government an infrastructure that can be also used by the private sector in terms of an ID infrastructure, in terms of an payment infrastructure, in terms of providing standards that can be also used for defining the services of the private sector. And for me, and that's where I'm looking forward for this discussion, is to see what are the requirements from the public side to realize so that the private sector can really use them and not go for let's say, proprietary solutions and everybody's building his own private infrastructure in terms of ID and things like that. And there are requirements on reliability, there are requirements that these services are really distributed and used by the population. It's not just a standard which has been defined but nobody is using them. And I think these are the things which are really matters. I'm really looking forward about your opinion about that and where we are today and what we can do to improve that more.
Thank you, Amar. I feel like you brought up really important points like interoperability and open source, and also how does GovTech work with DPI, because so far conversations always seem to be in silos, but they actually, GovTech enables digital public infrastructure to some degree, right? Maybe now it's interesting to hear Tamara's opinion, also since you come from the public sector, you've had so much experience.
Thanks so much, Pooja and Ashira and the team for putting this event together. Thank you all of you brave humans who woke up on a sunny Saturday morning and said, it would be a perfect opportunity to talk and listen about DPI. So I'm going to build on very insightful comments from my fellow awesome panelists and share a bit about how my teammates and I have leveraged DPI movement to truly change the culture in government and how the government works. And so I was thrilled talking to some of you this morning and yesterday, thrilled to learn that some of you are either aiming a job in public sector or are already working in public sector, as I really think that while often the most challenging we have, well, I'm a passionate public servant and bureaucracy hacker, obviously biased public servant, but I think we have the most meaningful and most rewarding mission. So throughout my journey as a passionate public servant, I had an opportunity to partner and learn from amazing humans like yourself and government leaders from across the world. And in a context of DPI, I wanted to center in most of my comments, you'll hear how it has been about people and humans powering this movement rather than the tech. Tech is just one tool in the toolbox and not a solution. So I wanted to center a lot of my comments about it and share some lessons learned of how this has been truly the catalyst to changing how government works. And so in California state government, when I started my journey, open data, it was 2010 back then when open data movement started, and it was truly the catalyst and tip of a spear to changing the mindset and how we were looking at even data, moving from more of a scarcity, this is my data, to abundance, let's work with amazing humans outside of the government to co-design solutions. And so our small and big wins of our open data movement paved the space, gave us permissions and some budget, executive order to create 2 startups in government, Office of Innovation and Office of Digital Services. And after then kind of moving back quickly to my experience in Montenegro, after 30, where I have also taken a lot of lessons learned from what we've done in California. After 30 years, imagine we had the same sort of party leading the government for 30 years with the president and prime minister rotating. So after 30 years of the same party rule, we had a change of government. The prime minister was a university professor, and he wanted to create a technocrat government. I had an opportunity to come back and serve as the first digital minister. So I packed up my manifestos, toolkits, and all my playbooks from California, And though I knew, the culture is going to eat a strategy for breakfast, and that happened literally every morning, I knew that whether it's, California is now the 4th largest economy in the world, or the tiniest, smallest country in the world, like we have 500,000 people in Montenegro, there'll be a lot of translatable lessons learned and things that we can leverage. And this is, I think, at the core of this DPI movement. How can we leverage and reuse and reshare not just the open code, but the hacks, the plays, even the failures, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I've learned a lot of them have been applicable. But going back to sort of the catalyst of both the change, whether it's California or Montenegro, that open data has truly forced us to think differently. In California, we were really pushing back 2011 to build truly open source open data portal when you had a lot of vendors bombarding us with creating a proprietary one. So we use DCAN and CCAN. You must have heard about Code for America back then. The brigades and the civic tech community was really helping us build the first products that then we iterated with them. They helped us optimize the code. And from there on, another sort of, I like to often say how crises have been the catalyst to moving things forward. I think Winston Churchill famously said, "Do not let good crises go to waste." And one of such infamous crises that we all had to navigate through was COVID. That was an opportunity for us at the state of California to then take a lot of that open collaboration that we've established with our partners from outside of the government, take it to the next level. One of the things that I often like to talk about and help solve is capacity for government to deliver. And governments around the world often struggle with that capacity, whether they're big or small, which is, again, going back to your comment about leveraging our partners from private industry. During COVID-19, we were able to pull some of the brightest minds from data science and other spheres and kind of augment the capacity of our small team to build product, research, data, content teams. And so DPI has been the catalyst for changing the radical how of how we work in government, leverage data, design, and research to really understand what are the problems that we are trying to solve. I think any bureaucracy is struggling with that, and especially government who has to be really intentional with prioritizing what problems you're trying to solve. And so really the DPI and leveraging open and working by kind of open by default with product managers on GitHub brought people from outside to help us, force us really bake this into the operating principles of how we work, has also forced us to change our habits, iterate not just on products, but also policies. So quickly we were leveraging the feedback and insights around, for example, during COVID, how people are feeling, what are their biggest concerns or fears, and bake that into the guidance and the policies around COVID, and then further down the line and expand it across the entire kind of policy spectrum. So I think I feel like I monologued a lot. I can share a bit more in my next prompt that Pooja will ask, but I will pass it on to the amazing woman here to my right for her to share.
And I agree. Thank you, Tamara, for bringing up, I think, one important angle of humanness and inclusion. I hand over now to Yolanda to also give.
Thank you. I was so inspired by Tamara, and as Pooja mentioned, I have now the privilege to lead the digital development practice for Latin America and the Caribbean in the World Bank. But overall, I've been 20 years working in the intersection of public policy and technology, and that's where my passion is. And across my journey from zero-level government in Zapopan, my hometown, to national level in the president office with the highest political support to run digital and to really leverage the use of technology to solve people's needs, and then going into the international organizations ecosystem, I'm truly convinced that global partnerships can really make a difference. And in the space of DPI, I think we have a tremendous opportunity, because it doesn't matter where we are, what sector you are working with, education, health, public or private, you are interacting with technology. And beyond technology, what is really important is digital services and how digital services thought and designed from a user needs can really make a difference in people's life. And at the World Bank, that's something that we are leveraging and transforming as an organization. Before it was putting all these resources into connectivity, great. In Latin America and the Caribbean, we have 83% of coverage. We still need to do the work. But beyond that is what you do with that connectivity, how we use connectivity to really enable a digital economy that can really allow small and middle enterprises to become more innovative, to create more employment. If you want to have a very good poverty reduction policy, it's true employment. If you want to drive employment, you need a digital economy that can really leverage everything that we have today. And I think the biggest challenge, and Tamara touches very important points in terms of digital transformation in governments, goes around three main areas. Making sure that digital transformation is a state policy. It's not something just happening here or there. It's really something that comes from the very top to say, okay, these are the digital priorities in health, in education, in the governance of core DPI like identity, payments, interoperability. Then with that highest political support, you need an institutional setup, an institutional transversal entity that can bring together other sectors and sit down in a table to say, what are the standards that we're going to use, right? Technology is technology. What makes technology work is when you connect all these different registries and frameworks to create services. But you need that convening power at the institutional level to make sure that all the different investments happening in the new e-health system, in the new tax system, in the new education system really make sense when everything needs to be orchestrated. And then the third element is people, is the skills. Do we have the right skills in government to design services according to user needs? Do we have the right enterprise architects in our teams to really make sense of all these technology investments and all these registries? And that's how frameworks like GovStack really come into play to accelerate that process from a very pure technology point of view, but having in mind that technology is just a mean. What really matters is the institutional framework that you put in place, the people that are driving those technology decisions to really think how to best design services to make access to new opportunities equal. And let me give you a very concrete example. Suppose that I'm 65 years old today, and according to Mexican legislation, I'm entitled to a pension. In a more normal setting, that will mean that I will go to a social protection office with a lot of documents that says that I work and that I did the homework and I'm entitled to a pension. But what if I'm sitting here and today is my birthday and I got a message from the government saying, congratulations, Yolanda, we did all the cross checks and you're ready to receive your pension. If nothing has changed in the payment record that we have in our system, enjoy. No website, no office, no queuing, no line, no documents. These are proactive digital services. I'm 65, so I'm no longer that eager to go into clicking on something, right? So just push notification to really allow me to enjoy a benefit that I work all my life through. So this is the new generation of digital government services that many countries are currently putting together, and you can do that when you have done the work of having the right institutional framework in place for all this interoperability to happen behind me to get a notification. And the way the World Bank encouraged this is with three main elements. Financing, of course, but also with knowledge, the right policies, the right frameworks and evidence on how to leverage this orchestration to be put together, and then the convening power. Having a lot of say in global convenience. We just launched a DPI procurement working group. We're very active in the open source ecosystem, and we're really into peering countries to learn from each other. So that's where we are. I'm happy to continue this conversation in the next round.
Thank you, Yolanda. I also want to say something important I think you brought up is all the benefits of having digital public infrastructure. And the reason why we also situated this panel at this time is I feel like you all know that there's now a lot of conversation about DPI, the benefits of it, but there's also a stream of like countries or a community that's talking about, look, these are problems. There could be an issue with sovereignty if we are to implement like a global framework, for example, or there are issues with, say, privacy. This was a big conversation in India, of course, because we implemented and then we started legislating our more data privacy regulation, but this is a constant recurring thread. And that's why this brings me to round 2, where I thought it would be interesting to speak a bit more and hear from you about like these tensions in DPI from the different angles that you come from. My first question is to Amar. Amar, you spoke a lot about like the private sector. I'm curious to hear your opinion about what you feel like could be one thing that a public sector or a public institution could adopt from the private sector in terms of its innovation approach. There's always a sense and a feeling that the public sector doesn't innovate as fast as the private sector does for different reasons. So I would be very curious to hear your take.
Yeah, I think that's a very important question to talk about what could be the role of the public sector and what is the role of the private sector, and what are things we think that they are like this, like we pretend that probably the public sector is not as innovative as the public sector, the private sector. And just let me go back 2 steps, because that's, I think, important for the following discussion. So Tamara and also you guys said that we had a change in the way how we look at the relevance of public sector working in the digital infrastructure. So for a long time, we had the feeling that the government does not need to be on the forefront of technology, because everything is going to be done by the private sector. And we'll have these big companies. We have Google and AWS and Microsoft, and they will do all the innovative stuff, and they provide for us the platforms, and we are working on, and everything is fine. And the only thing the government should do is not to interfere with the things we are doing. Then we saw the pandemic, and then we saw all the security challenges during the past 2 years, and then things are changing. We see that the government needs to interact, the governments at least need to set standards, and we believe that the basis will be still competition between private actors, but the standards and leadership must come from the government. And I think this is a fundamental change in how we deal with this, and that this is working also on large scale, has been showed by India, by Aadhaar and UPI and other things, which provided for 1.5 billion people an infrastructure that I don't believe it would have been in this scale possible only relying on a private governed infrastructure, so something like this. So, and if we know how roles could be distributed, government and the public sector could challenge the private side for innovation, and addresses the needs that the public sector has, and do the right governance for it, and utilizes everything which is coming from the private sector. And the private sector is broad. The private sector are companies, are large tech companies, as well as startups with a high innovation potential. And I think that could be operating model that brings the different aspects together. The aspect that the government is not driven by individual, or shouldn't be driven by individual interests, rather than having doing things for the good, and having an infrastructure of private competition that pushes also innovation, pushes also for efficiencies and things like that. So that could be a picture where we use, where we combine both sides in a good way.
Thank you. I feel I'm always very happy when I hear about India being a good example of implementation, because I'm proud. But of course, there are many problems also with the Indian example, because we legislated after we after we had implementation, right? So there are always like issues about that. Thank you, Amar. That was very interesting. My next question is maybe then following up on this like thread of conversation is to Andrea. Andrea, GovStack, and you also explained a bit about what the GovStack approach is. What are the offerings of GovStack? It would be interesting for us to hear in practice what have been some of the hardest governance challenges when trying to get multiple ministries or even countries to adopt this kind of common specifications, and also tying it with Amar's input about like only the private sector like innovating. Do you see a shift that governments now see that they take the lead, and what's the hardest thing you've seen when you've taken the GovStack approach to countries?
Yeah, thank you so much, Pooja. And thanks for this wonderful discussion. I think it brings so many topics on the table and it's like also interesting to me to see that we are, wherever we are, right, be it the bank, be it the US and implementing from this side, or be it more from the private sector perspective and bringing things together, that the challenges we see, but also the opportunities we see, that this change is needed right now into the direction to a better collaboration ecosystem, actually, in order to really come up with something that can serve for the people and for long-lasting and sustainable infrastructures in the future, right? And what we definitely experienced is that one of the, so I think we can definitely see 3 to 4 topics which are quite obvious in collaborating, what makes it difficult for countries when we start collaborating with them, really making success or moving fast. So I think first is silos. Like we see too many silos from many angles, be it on a technical level. So very often there are actually systems in place that are siloed, so they're not open, they're not interoperable. And in order to implement principles that would be needed in order to really build an innovative and long-lasting system, therefore you need more transparency, you need more interoperability in those systems in order to implement rules like once only, like the things that Yolanda just came up with, so that you have a more intuitive government which comes to you and you are not standing in line and waiting for the silo. Then there's also silos in thinking. So usually governments very often, and we've seen this everywhere in the world, so we are not looking into any other direction, this is a global problem. We have like political priorities, and they are given at a central level, but they are also given to be it the Ministry of Agriculture, be it the Ministry of Health, and whomever, and everybody wants to own his own in a way. So it's very often complicated to really come together and to say, sit, concentrate, also on a central level, before we really build into a digital future and transform our country into the future. We need to concentrate in the way we need to set standards, because this is the only way in chance we have to reach interoperability at the end of the day. So I think this is really something that we see. So another thing is like the second topic I would like to emphasize on is like in the topic of capacities. So we see like there are a lot of countries and a lot of agencies which have like a huge level of maturity already if it comes to technical expertise. But then there are also, mostly within the governments that are apart, there are also agencies, they don't have the capacities. So what we really try to come up with is to start with capacity development. So we try to make understand and to really bring capacity developments on a broader level on government side, to really bring your experts that need to take decisions at the end of the day, and we let them know what we think, how innovative DPI can look like, and how they can benefit, and the country can benefit, and also their own role could benefit from what we're coming up with. So this is something that we're really trying to do. And then the concern, and I think we touched upon this already, is the topic of sovereignty. So this is like so big, and as you just mentioned also, like we came from the world where we thought like the private sector is doing this for us, but we now all kind of fell back into the field of it, kind of there's like this role that everybody's really sitting and waiting what to do right now, because everybody feels no, it would be better to really own your own architecture, right? And not just giving this for granted to the private sector, you build this and then I let you know if any changes here. It would be better to really own your own, we call it often stack, so your own infrastructure behind. So this comes with hardware and software. And of course it's like a huge decision, also country leaders fearing taking the wrong decision here, and we know it's a market. It's also like a field of business, not only for the private sector, but also on a geopolitical level. So we're seeing a lot of influence from donors and from also other geopolitical players that are they understand that this transformation process we are right now in will change how we live in a couple of years, and will make the decision on whether we will be able to build allies and also avenues for collaboration, be it migration, be it trade, be it whatever. And the closer you are to the system that's then implemented in the countries, the better you will operate, right? So what we try to do with GovStack is to really agree on more or less global practices, global standards that can be taken, and we really think they are neutral, and try to give like an effort to the world that this is building on the best practices and not siloing, building the next silo for you, but opening up for more interoperability and also collaboration and thus innovation, because this is also especially inviting the private sector to come on board. And we have seen like now we have 30 to 40 companies already reporting back to us that they have compliant products, and we really try to really make this a community for better innovation in this field as well. Maybe I stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea. Andrea, I feel one thing that was really interesting was when you said about like this whole like maybe geopolitical competition or like some kind of financing and this whole donor ecosystem where we're now seeing certain things being like funded more, or there's more conversation about financing. And I got then to Yolanda, because it would be interesting to hear from you, Yolanda, because you mentioned one major area of cooperation with the World Bank, of course, is financing. The question for you is, what are the most effective ways to build state capacity for DPI implementation in countries where institutional readiness is uneven? Maybe you could also tell us a bit about what the World Bank considers institutional readiness, and how do you ensure like this financing and policy advice are aligned with inclusive and context-aware digital transformation goals?
Yes, I was thinking to use this second round to share examples. And I think a very recent one, very inspired by GovStack, is a consortium that we launched in March during the spring meetings, which is a major convening period for the bank, leveraging World Bank financing capacities, Inter-American Development Bank, which is a regional bank very present in Latin America and the Caribbean, co-develop, which is a fund only doing DPI, and Red Real. And Red Real is a very important convening network in Latin America and the Caribbean, where we have 33 countries, and we don't have nothing compared to like European Union. Right here you have already a governance in place where you agree standards like ADAS, no, now 2.0, or where you have Gaia X or many other elements, or I think it's called Medusa for the cables in the Mediterranean. So you have many different elements, or X-Row consortium with different countries contributing to maintaining an interoperable platform. We don't have those elements in Latin America. So everything is political will. So imagine the challenge of putting together political will of 33 countries. Nonetheless, we did our bet, and using Red Real Convening Power, which is an annual meeting that happens with all CIOs in Latin America, we launched the LAC Digital Citizen Consortium. And the objective is to co-design an EID broker that can allow us to integrate digitally the region. We ran an experiment with Mercosur countries, meaning Brazil, which is the biggest market in Latin America and the Caribbean, Uruguay, which is very tiny but very powerful country, digitally speaking, and with a lot of entrepreneurial ecosystem in place, Argentina and Paraguay. So these countries already start testing, and you can facilitate a lot of trade, talent things happening, and we want to leverage into Mercosur experience to making it regional. So I think using the convening power of the bank to bring other regional banks, to bring other founders in place, but also reusing already a network like Red Real is making a difference. So yesterday we had the kickoff of this work, and the main objective is to have new countries joining the Mercosur effort by November this year. So we're using the convening power of Red Real. So every year we showcase the progress of this consortium. So I think that's a very good concrete example of how we are making these financing mechanisms very tangible in accelerating reusable software components from the design to the usage. Then another very good example, and I feel very proud because many colleagues are here, is the Women in GovTech Challenge. And this is a very good inspirational example of how when you bring the combining power of global organizations like GovStack partners, ITU, GIZ, Government of Estonia, and then the World Bank, an open call that brought together more than 200 women from all over the world to use all GovStack resources to design a digital service, from defining the problem, architecting, using different building blocks, and then working together in a global team to deliver. So within 6 weeks, we managed to have 25, I would say 90% ready prototypes being developed by these 208 women from all over the world. And when you think about it, yes, we feel very proud. Thank you. It's a challenge. Just try to put together a meeting with people that are all over the place. But they did. And beyond just building women in tech pipeline of talent, we also bring it together a community of practitioners that can really leverage all these resources, all these networks, when they become decision makers, because that's our aim. And I think it's important to always remember that technology must serve a particular need that you're trying to solve for your user. But that technology needs to be designed by users that are men and female. And the reality is that that is not happening. 30% of any digital team that you think in the world, it doesn't matter the region, is only women. If you go into the decision-making process, we have 193 countries participating in a global survey that is done by United Nations to measure digital government maturity. It's called UN-DESI Government Survey. From 193, only 11% are ministries of head of agencies like Tamara or myself when I was running Mexico Digital Agenda. So it's a huge challenge when you think about bringing the private and the public sector together, when you need to represent context and needs from all parts of the population. So I think that is very important on how the bank leverage our convening power, and we're very much looking forward to continue engaging and hopefully having a third cohort and more countries building together the DPI that should leverage reach and scalability in digitization of government services.
Thank you, Yolanda. I think one more thing Yolanda didn't mention about the challenge, which is very interesting, is that actually these women came, some of them came from no tech background. And then they sat together and built these like super technical prototypes. And I fully agree with you, Yolanda. Of course, you know how passionate I am about the Women in GovTech Challenge. It's something we've been doing for a long time now. I think this also taps into a very important argument about inclusion and human values. And I feel like, Tamara, I want to ask you this, but how has DPI helped your teams shift government values, principles, culture, and how government work gets done in general, especially from all your implementation? And in all your roles, we have been noticing that you've created bridges for public and private sector collaboration in the context of DPI. How do you feel like these partnerships can maximize innovation?
Thank you. So I'm going to build on really amazing comments from my fellow panelists. Again, going back to Yolanda, going with the examples at the core. Moving from California to Montenegro, there was this preconceived notion that coming to a small country, it will be like your agile sandbox and you can shift things quickly, but it was nothing close to that. In fact, completely the opposite. So I will build on the comments on how we leverage the partnerships, both how we leverage the platforms and communities like GovStack and others, as well as World Bank, in a kind of subversive way to make sure that we are moving forward. We had potentially a short mandate, and so we wanted to quickly create this digital capacity, use DPI as a Trojan horse for that. What really helped us was another crisis. I got to be a digital minister at the tail end of COVID in Montenegro, which again allowed us to mobilize the community to be a part of the solution. We leveraged the crisis standard that we open sourced in California. And then we leveraged WHO's and European Union's COVID-19 certificate to build the testing certificate, which quickly showed to my peers in government that we don't have to build this alone. And so then quickly I was able to convince everyone that our digital transformation strategy really needs to center the collaborative approach to software development and ultimately enable the broader ecosystem to engage with us, to create this ownership so they can continue to help us optimize the code and build in the open. Other examples of digital public goods that we have shamelessly stolen and borrowed and forked from other countries and states are, well, we co-designed Montenegro's website by leveraging the open source code and the standard from both California and UK's government. We forked Open Opportunities, which is like communication platform. It is an open source tool that you can all find on GitHub. UK's Notify, we also forked and implemented in Montenegro. Started work with Estonians around implementing their X-Road in terms of the information infrastructural layer. And so those were just some opportunities for us to work really closely, not just with amazing humans from other governments, but also with amazing folks from the private sector who helped us build this, but also slowly create this muscle to actually tightly define the problem, then iterate, prototype and then iterate some more around how we are moving things forward, whether it's developing products, but also policies. And this has built really the resilience. This working in the open has built in resilience. We had 3 large cyber attacks in Montenegro that has exposed that our systems were not optimized for security. This was another way or an opportunity to bring in folks from outside to help us rebuild the systems and do it in a bit more of a smarter way to think through prioritizing security, and then several other sort of crises that have allowed us to bring folks from DPI space to help us. So we had the second largest mass shooting in my hometown, Cetinje, about 6 months ago. 30 people over those 2 mass shootings have done that has forced us to really dig in deep. We brought in folks, volunteers, who have worked on community violence intervention from US and other places to understand the root causes of the gun violence in our local communities, but also we have pulled in DPI community to help us create health registers and think more holistically around how we can use DPI to collect the data and understand what that data is telling us. So keep going back to that DPI community, but also not just from the space of leveraging the code, but more importantly, leveraging the community to codify the lessons learned, the hacks, the plays. Earlier on, I talked about how in California, we, during our open data and COVID, it forced us to work in the open. We didn't just share, the code and the standards. We also codified, the insights from our research, which we shared with the states, content design as well, making sure that content is accessible and written in on a 7th grade reading level, sharing lessons learned around content. Around translation in a way that is not considered digital public good, but how do we make it accessible, any learnings or resources around translation and share with other countries, states, and partners. So those are some other, I think, more valuable goods that we have been able to share among this community. And again, I think it goes back to the people in the room. I've often would go to Yolanda and ask her, here's where I'm struggling and where our teams are struggling. How can maybe a country with not such deep pockets and a small, very small budget show the successes by leveraging what is already out there instead of reinventing the wheel. Just last thing I'm going to say, the very subversive way we've made sure that what we are building, because working in the open is not exciting for, I don't know, I guess a typical politician. It is like a long-term marathon sort of mission, but we did use a contract with World Bank, and so we kind of locked in the next set of ministers who came in after our government to build this digital capacity and to center digital transformation around DPI. So thank you, World Bank, and for forcing the next administrations to build in this open way, focusing on the core capacity that Andrea was also talking about.
Thank you so much, Tamara, and thank you to all our speakers for, I think, your expertise in this round and all of your opinions. This brings me to the last round before I open it up for the audience. I have a common question for each of you from all your different perspectives. What is your biggest hope and your biggest concern for DPI in the next 5 years? And maybe I will put Amar on the spot first.
So I think it could be a vision that we will have in 5 years in infrastructure and DPI core infrastructure. We will have core services like ID, like payment, that can be used in a federated or interoperable way, not on a national scale, but in an international collaboration environment. I think this is realistic, so if we just go to the basic services, it might work very well. And underneath that we have a collaboration, a competitive market of private sector companies providing services to such an infrastructure, so that we have a core governance and still have a competition market of private sectors. That could be a vision where I think that would bring us significantly to a next step. On the one side, and the other side, it's absolutely realistic. And my hope would be that we don't lose ourselves within the next 5 years in discussions what would be probably the best way, the better way, rather than getting a step forward, a next step, and the next step. So that would be the thing I think we should prevent going into the wrong direction, just keeping discussing things rather than implementing things and getting into the next stage.
Thank you, Omar. And then maybe Yolanda.
Super aligned. I think it's very doable, to be quite honest, when you think about global frameworks like the 2030 Development Agenda, that at least on the part that we are responsible for, which is driving digital, is to deliver. And 100% of government services should be available online. Why? Because we can. Because we have all the technology to do so, because we have the right frameworks to do so, and because in doing so, we are democratizing access to human rights, like digital identity, right? It's not a luxury, it's a human right. We can enable access to make it easier for any entrepreneur to open up a business anywhere they want, if they have a digital signature in place, if they have a way to enable digital payments for their products to access a market, in the case of Latin America, of 630 million people, if all countries agree on the same standards. And of course, putting in place DPI safeguards, putting in place coherence in the policy-making process. That's why it's so important, knowledge sharing, and the bank invests a lot in this. We're bringing an entire delegation from Latin America and the Caribbean next week to Geneva, where we have an open wallet forum, because it's through peer learning that you can really save a lot of time, especially in the governance part. In my experience, not only in Mexico, but around the world, the challenge is not that technology. That is just a ground space to sit technical colleagues and agree on the standards. It's the governance elements that need to go in place to make sure the countries have the sovereignty to decide, but also the coherence that is needed to have global integration in those decisions. And that's the biggest challenge, to make sure that no one is left behind. So I'm very positive, to be quite honest, about really using the power of an institution like the bank to help countries thrive, to really bring the topic into the highest level, to really work in building institutional capacities. And my last example is a partnership that we launched in the last Digital Summit with Coursera, which is an e-learning content platform. And we did an open call for the 33 countries in LAC to propose a digital skills program, because that's one of the biggest challenges. How you reach scalability in building digital skills to design digital services, to leverage DPI, et cetera. And we were so impressed because we got 13 proposals with a lot of variety on how to design the digital skills programs, from programs focusing on SMEs training, from programs focusing on public servants trainings, other programs focusing on using Coursera to train kids at middle school so they choose STEM careers. And the beauty is the learning community. So we were having a session last week, and all the countries were sharing how they put together their learning paths using Coursera. So that's just a very concrete example of something on how something that can be so technical, right? A library of content. Mm-hmm. When you put a policy framework in place, when you put a community of practitioners to share how they are solving a context and a very specific context need, you can make magic happen. So I think using the power of partnerships and really motivating policymakers to try and to leverage these engagements can really make a difference in the next 5 years.
Thank you. I feel like both Amar and you have been really like given a lot of hope and a lot of like focus on implementation. So I'm excited for the next 5 years. Andrea?
So thank you very much. I'm now also very inspired from, especially also your last point that you made, like in terms of collaboration and to really enforcing that. So, and what I really wish for, if I would have a wish, my wish would be that we could have a next Women in GovTech Challenge, and that this is also again being wonderfully implemented by dear Pooja, who really make a tremendous effort, and we had the most impactful and the most successful Women in GovTech Challenge this year, and we will launch at the WSIS World. You know better than I. World Society Information...
World Supernet Information Society.
Exactly, thank you, in Geneva. And we're going to launch the alumni network of the Women in GovTech Challenge. And I think it's so important that I would really love to see that we can prove that by doing this work and like bringing so many women together that are working in GovTech or also in public positions worldwide, that this really will impact the way we collaborate about DPI. Because I have the strong belief that collaboration and coming together and sharing experiences and then developing for the better is like quite a female attribute that we really have to leverage much more. And this is why I really hope that we can make this effort together also in the upcoming month and years. And I really also hope that governments will more and more own and understand the power that DPI can have, and that they will also use it to really for more inclusion and for developing more human-centric digital services, that we can really see an effort also for the people in those countries, that more people, as you also mentioned, Yolanda, this is a human right to have an ID, or also having the ability to quicker start a business and to really gain or to really draw from the services that your government, like social protection services, that your government should provide you in case of emergency, and we're seeing far too many from this. So this would really be a hope. And last but not least, another wish is that the DPI and the solutions and the platforms that we're going to see in the next years will be much more, that we have a look at what Ukraine did, because they had like an immense and a wonderful digital transformation journey in the last years. And I think what they really made is they achieved a platform with the DIA platform that the people really love, and it's beautiful. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that. Like the design is like outstanding. And if you're listening to the Minister of or Vice Minister of Digital and for Euro integration, Valeria Jonan, who is also a close collaboration partner of the GovStack initiative, we're now trying also to share their experiences. She's quoting always, if she's asked, what is the secret behind the achievements that you made in Ukraine in your digital transformation journey? And she said, it's like, we're building this, our design principle was we're building something that the people can love. And I think if you put this as in the center of your development and your design and whatever practices, I think then you have a very good advice in the back of your heart to do something that the people and your citizen will be able to love. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. That was very inspiring. And maybe now tomorrow. Last but not the least and importantly.
Andrea gave me a great segue. I love that you used the word love, which I feel in abundance in this room among my colleagues, and my big hope. I've seen DPI movement really shift the consciousness around how we are approaching this work. We are building more collaboratively, even starting from the problem definition space, and DPI has a huge chance to help us leave no one behind, and that's the struggle that every government has. And so really looking the forest from the trees, going back to what Yolanda and Andrea are doing with their platforms, creating not just the library, but the community peer-to-peer network where we feel like we are a part of each other's solutions instead of having to reinvent the wheel. I've leaned on our colleagues from Ukraine so much to essentially repurpose what they've done, not just in terms of code, but in terms of the plays and hacks and how they were moving things forward. But another one, my hope is that more of folks outside of the government or any sphere would roll up their sleeves and be a part of the solution, because decisions are made by those who show up, especially in today's fragile world where everything is breaking. We have a lot of oligarch leaders in government, the folks who come in from outside and kind of roll up their sleeves and work with amazing public servants. They're slowly shifting this leadership and the way that things are being built. So I'm hoping really to model, and we have been modeling the leadership grounded in abundance, optimism, unity, instead of fear and sticks and scarcity and blame, which we see a lot in politics and technology today. So how can we leverage the DPI movement to do that? Also hoping that, that this DPI doesn't gets demystified and doesn't just speak to the techies, but also folks from all different spheres can come in and play a big role. When I think of innovation, to me, the definition of innovation is problem definition. So how do you really, truly tightly define the problem? So we need anthropologists, sociologists, anyone out there who cares. And as Andrea was saying, that Valeria was pointing to building the delightful services that people will love. It comes from that space of empathy. And then let's do less talking and less convening and more committing and more iterating. I love that Yolanda and Andrea, you both were talking about prototypes powered by women and how you iteratively scale them. Let's think through how can we join our forces to do more of the delivery, but also be a part of each other's solution when we need it the most and share those hacks, plays, insights with each other.
Thank you, Tamara. I now want to open up the round for questions from the audience. Please feel free to raise your hand and you can introduce yourself and then ask your question. Are there any questions?
The first question is the most difficult.
Yeah, hi, my name is Alessandro, former Hertie student, graduated a couple of years ago. Thank you. And I now get to lead the public affairs team at the German AI Association, so very much representing the private sector. And I was wondering what, in your current position and from your perspective, where you see the both chances as well as, I would say, challenges with the current AI transformation, both in government, but also maybe with the perspective of public-private partnerships and into integrating AI into DPI.
Do you already know who you want to ask it to, or okay?
Do you want to go like a round of questions and then we?
Maybe we just do one by one. You can just answer this. Whoever wants to take this one.
I was thinking on a good example to leverage public-private partnerships, and I think, for example, digital ID is a very good example of a building block that can enable both public services, but as well private services. And in Mexico in 2018, we launched the FinTech law. And the main objective of the lab was just to set up the ground to enable financial services fully digital, but leveraging on a core building block, which was the process of knowing your customer using digital ID mechanisms enabled by government. So I think that, in our case, unlock the possibility to reduce the know your customer process from weeks and paper-based processes into just seconds of checking the API of the population registry and validate that I'm Yolanda and that I'm entitled to have access to financial services. And this, I think this has been very common now around the world. I think it's also very important to keep in mind that what is relevant is not the building block itself, but also the most important use cases that will detonate massive usage of that specific building block. So digital signature, for example, is a very common building block that unless you have an executive order for governments that says, from day X, all government entities are going to start using digital signature, that is hard to happen just because government is so used to paper-based memos and communications. But once you have an executive order, a few agencies starting to use the digital signature, then is widely used. Private sector is more eager because it really facilitates trade and transactions when you're using digital signature, but that's a very common element, and also to make sure that you use the same standards and the same governance mechanism to make sure that you have legal certainty when using a document that is signed digitally. So I think the beauty of public public-private partnerships is how to make sure that all the investment done in a particular building blocks, payments, for example, I think Brazil is a great example with PIX, where the central bank is the owner of that building block, completely built on the open standards, and unlock digital payments and services built around that building block massively in a country that is so key for Latin American economy. So it's a must, and it's something that should be leveraged as part of a wider digital ecosystem in countries.
Probably just addressing the second part of the question regarding AI and the uses of AI in GovTech. So my feeling is that Gen AI changed significantly the view of governments towards the usage of technology, because it's much more applicable for the way how governments used to work. So they are very text-based, heavily text-based, and things like blockchain and quantum computing and things like that are something which are too abstract for a lot of people work in the public administration. This changed with Gen AI, and that led, at least this is my experience during the last 2 years, that the governmental, the public administration is some kind of on the forefront of usage of AI, Gen AI in that. So when I compare today our customers, the different governmental entities, they started using in core areas Gen AI earlier than a lot of private sector companies are doing this. So there is a change because they understand this technology much more than they did before with other technologies. So I think that's a positive thing with respect to AI and Gen AI and things like that.
Can I just add one more thing, sort of building on what you guys said? I'm sort of using this momentum of AI when we are talking to other governments and sort of helping them think through both the standards but also the capacity. We've seen a lot of governments in a rush to sprinkle this AI fairy dust. They are buying all these, or at least working with vendors to identify a product without clearly identifying the problem that they're trying to solve. And so to hammer, everything looks like a nail. So as a community, we really have to be careful not to treat AI as a hammer. So we've been truly leveraging this AI movement to help governments think through the non-sexy bottom of the pyramid things, data hygiene, the registers, all the things that a lot of governments don't have in order, but also the capacity. So the ex-President Biden has created a really great executive order that has leveraged the AI standard and policy movement to hire, well, now Elon fired them all, but before Elon came to government, hire amazing, not just data scientists, but also folks from many different arenas to think through all different facets of what it takes to build AI meaningfully. And so that has been sort of a hook to get governments to think more holistically around their data hygiene, and then what problem they're trying to solve, and who do they need on their team in order to iterate on that problem, policy, or a program solution that they're building.
And maybe a concrete example, very inspired by GIZ, is that you will be surprised by how many use cases are coming from the Global South. And I really love the one in Kenya, where they're using generative AI to access government services portal in Swahili, which is an indigenous language. And when you think a country like Mexico, we have 68 official indigenous languages. When you think in a country of Brazil, you have more than 500 indigenous languages and indigenous dialectos. I don't know the word in English, but it's just amazing the potential when you put all these technologies into really closing many digital inclusion gaps that before it was very expensive to solve. Today it's there. So it's on us to really put forward those type of use cases.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I wanted to exactly also mention this one. We are also, this is exactly the one, the Kenya chatbot. So we are collaborating jointly with the team, the Fair Forward team, which is also like a GIZ and BMZ financed initiative, which is exactly looking into the field of how can we make it more accessible and more inclusive, the entire work about AI, but also responsible at the same time. And in this regard, there has taken place the Hamburg Sustainability Conference. I'm not sure if you have followed that one, but they came up with like a joint declaration on responsible AI. And I think it's signed by a lot of states, by a lot of private sector actors, and also civil society actors and international organizations to really work around this topic much more. And I think the opportunity to, and it's not just an opportunity, it's also a must to collaborate with the private sector on this. This is very clear. So we have it's also an invite, which is now to come, is we as the GovStack initiative, we are looking into our Gov specs, like the specifications which are at the core of everything that we're doing, like specifications for the modular building blocks we're providing. And we are have in our strategy 2.0 is actually aiming at making them AI responsive and really working towards this. And we are looking into, because we want to develop like the best global standard and practices available to the world, like the minimum standard that could be adopted and then customized by each country. But we are looking for participation also from the field of the private sector to have a common look at this and support us in the working groups around this, and to let us know what you think, what's best and what's the best practice, because this shouldn't just only come from the governments, but of course also from the private sector. And we see a lot of interest also from AI companies in Germany, but worldwide, to really look how we can leverage and make AI more responsible, inclusive, and more accessible to all the people worldwide. So this is an invite to you. Please let us know if you would like to participate. I can share more information about that if you like. Thanks.
Thank you. Also, thank you for the question. I think we managed to go an hour without speaking about AI while talking about tech, so it was very relevant. Is there another question in the room? Yes.
Yeah, I'm Horacio. I study at Hertie, and something that you mentioned was like how to increase the governance, because that usually the technology is not the problem, and I always say it's more like how you develop that policy capacity that the people need to have, and also the digital literacy that the citizens need to have to leverage that. So in a sense, how do you think it's the best way to balance, in a way to move forward, implementing the technology, the infrastructure that is usually not a problem, and I think that usually that governance parts tend to be underestimated, and how to balance those things in order to deliver real results. So the question is, yeah, what do you think? I don't know if it was clear.
I think Andrea and Yolanda should start answering this question, because you have been the masterminds of creating the governments worldwide. You want to start?
You said I just said last one.
You have different examples, and I encourage really to be very proactive in any governance mechanism. So at the legislation level, that one is the hardest. Just to give an example, in Mexico, we have more than 20 initiatives right now in Congress on cybersecurity and AI. And those are very long-term process, very important though. So what we do, there is a lot of evidence being provided to the commissions within the Senate and the Congress that can inform each of the political parties when working on those initiatives. So I think that's very relevant in terms of, I would say, the knowledge bank. No? Really produce evidence, what is the best practice, different benchmarks about any type of regulation that could serve that level of that layer. But then you have the more technical one. And it's easier if you have, for example, in governments, the right mandate in the digital ministries of the digital agencies. Meaning you need to have the power. In my case, when I was in Mexico, I had the power to authorize or not authorize IT procurements. I didn't need the entire government IT budget, but I needed the mandate to make sure that any spending coming from the health department, the education department, the tax administration department comply with our ICT procurement policy that follow the same standards on interoperabilities, APIs, development, language, the software that you were using, etc. So that is a type of governance. And then multi-stakeholder mechanisms publicly recognized. So in our case, we have an interministerial commission for the development of e-government. So all CIOs, that in our case is a huge bureaucracy, 299 federal entities with their own digital teams, 32 states with their own state-level digital teams, and then 2,445 municipalities with their own digital teams. So you need an institutional place where everyone can sit and agree. What is the standard for birth certificates? What is the standard for payments? What is the standard for data protection? So that layer is easier because that is at the more executive and technical level, and it's important because then you can agree on the standards that everyone starts implemented at the more technical core, which is very important, while you have the other layer of discussions happening. Mm-hmm. And in my experience, what is very important is that delivery should be very iterative to inform both the technical body, making the consensus on the technical standard, as well as the policy ones. And at the policy level, what is also relevant is agree on principles. Then you can go into reaching the consensus to approve a specific law. But as long as you have an iterative process between these three elements, countries can really manage to deliver. It's not easy, that's why it's equally important to do the technology part right, but also really improve the governance, should be open, should be multi-stakeholder driven, and very iterative, using delivery inputs into updating your next generation of standards and guiding principles.
I think you mentioned, you touched upon most of the points that I would also absolutely agree and second that this is the most important things. I would add one more topic, or an ingredient to the soup, which is inspiration. So what I really think is before you start this journey, you really need to convince and you need leadership in this process. And in order to get someone accountable for what's then happening after, because there are decisions being made, they're very expensive, and everybody will look at you in the next years, what did you decide for, right? In order to start with like an inspirational thing, like with Ukraine, whatever, came up with successes and really make clear what is the potential that you could achieve if you do your homework right, is then a very good momentum to really that you need the interministerial backing, that there's one person who is accountable and needs to take decisions on those principles, on those standards, and then to see how can this jointly be developed and how is then the roadmap that you have to develop in order to make this happen. So I think I would just like to add this inspirational topic in order to really make the case and to get the things running and better agreement also on an interministerial level in the countries. Yep. Thanks.
I'll add on Yolanda and Andrea's great points. And so you touched on political capital in your previous comment and now in this comment, how important that is, getting the maybe senior leadership in whatever entity government to actually be bought in. And the power of governments comes through because you have then intentionally designed for ownership and outcomes, but also have permissions and agency in space to drive decisions. But I think even more powerful is the informal types of, whether it's collectives or alliances that we have all collectively been relying on to build and drive delivery forward. And again, that word inspiration comes to mind. And I'm going to share with you an entity, community, open civic, volunteer-based org. I was just telling Martina about it the other night, that we have put in place when COVID hit in California, when most of our systems were breaking down and were kind of bottled up. We realized that government cannot fix it alone. So back then we put together this entity called US Digital Response that has matched people from private sector, civil service to the civil sector to the government. And so it was like a matchmaking platform that has matched some of the best minds from data, product, human-centered design, content to be working on mission-critical problems in government. That network has grew 10,000 volunteers big that we have matched with governments all across the US. When I became a minister in Montenegro, because we had very, very little levers to quickly show successes, even though seemingly almost half of the country is employed in some part of government, local and federal, but those public servants did not get a chance to get the skills that they need or to be asked, what's your purpose? What is at the core of your passion? How do you want to contribute? So we've brought both the academy, but also folks from outside of the government to work on these problems. It's now called Rebel Alliance, so we've been matching amazing humans like yourself who work in different parts of the society with governments right next to the ministers or the prime ministers. We've been creating tiger teams, and we are iterating on the problems that they have, whether they're just not just product service problems, but policy and program problems. And so that's where I just want to touch on informal, alliances come into play. You don't need permissions because, again, I want to, decisions are, really relying on those who show up. You've all showed up today on Saturday, sunny Saturday, to think through how we can make our democracies better and our government stronger. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question. Yes.
My name is Timur, and I am an alumnus of the START Scholarship, and I work as a product manager at a process management software company. And we know that the governmental public services, bureaucratic processes are very cumbersome and very costly to the state. And through digitalization, we know that there is a lot of cost savings to be made. So how much potential do you see through the DPI initiative for savings for state budget, actually?
Yes.
Yeah, probably just that. I think in general with the digital transformation there will be a significant cost saving factor for the governmental processes and so on. But I think what's more important is not to use the possibilities or the capabilities of digitalization to make things even more complicated. I've been in a meeting where people have been from the government sector discussing about digitalization and the possibilities, and we had people from different companies that's saying what could be provided in terms of software and so on. And then one of the participants said, that's cool, then we can make things even more complex because we have all these capabilities of software. So I think the way should be in the way that we first of all look at the processes, if we need the processes, if the process need to be more streamlined, and then to see what would be the best way to digitalize them. For instance, we have a lot of processes, and we did that in our state, that you can skip completely. You don't even need to make a digital transformation for these processes. You just skip them because they used to be relevant, whatever, 30 years ago, but not today. And I think this is a very important aspect we should keep with us, not try to use technology, but rather than looking first if the processes are really needed, and then if we need them, to use technology to make them more efficient.
Mm-hmm. Is there another response?
Maybe just to add on this, but also to fully agree, I think there is a magic that happens the moment when you understand what a modular architecture could do for you. Because this really gives you the chance, if you want to think about it, that you have all those components ready in your architecture, and then you access them via a gateway if you need them. And then you can think about if the processes, as you're thinking them through, because you're usually starting from you're looking at a process and how can I digitize it, but it's the other way around. Think of what can happen if you have all the modules ready, and wherever you are in the government or wherever in whatever institution, and you have access by consent given by the citizen and by the authority, that you can draw from this source, and this component can do what it's supposed to do, then you can totally set up new processes, and you should set up new processes. And then it's a much more responsive system at the end of the day. So we had a conversation earlier also in Germany. Somebody asked about the E-Akte, how this would actually then happen with along with the GovStack approach. And then our tech lead just answered on this question, said not the E-Akte, it was the, no, it's like that the files are stored now digitally. It's Digitale Akte, so it's called. So there is the system that all the files that have been there are actually stored digitally, and that you can access them. And we said, from the system that where we come from, or the world where we come from with our concept, you would never need that, right? So we'd never need to store all the files and registries and whatever you have digitally in order then to re-access them, because this is what we do, because the processes mean it like this, but you can, and this is why I mean, start thinking from a different world and different functionalities in your architectures, and then think about the processes and if you can set them up.
Just to add that, very funny things, I absolutely agree. So we had a situation where we also introduced an e-active system, which is a digital file and folder systems. And then I tried to access a file. And the file was there, I could see them in this electronic system, but I couldn't access them. And it's like, why couldn't I access this file? So I said, oh, because somebody other has this file. So, this is the electronic file. How could somebody? Yeah, we just adapted the physical folder where somebody takes it and has it in his room, so nobody could access him. So they prevented us from accessing it. And that's exactly what you said. And that's real life.
So good.
And I think maybe just to also complement on this, it's equally important to have the right technical team in place as service design teams in place, because it's but really applying the right mapping of a user journey, identifying pain points, really understanding what the problem is that you wanted to solve, and iterating that process. If you have the right building blocks in place, it's amazing, the innovation ecosystem that should be creative. And I think technology advances so quickly that the governments will take time to get the right governance in place, the right legislation in place. But as long as you have good foundations, your identity, interoperability, consent, you name it, in GovStack resources, we have more than 11 technical specifications for each of these building blocks. Then you allow an innovation ecosystem of startups, open source communities, to build services that can really innovate the experience of citizens dealing with government. And it's a huge space for innovation there. Why? Because most of the time, digital teams are busy just running the systems themselves, no? But if you put a right policy to really welcome new ideas, new entrepreneurship into helping you deliver amazing experiences, I totally love the concept of DIA app, because they made it so simple to access government services that really millions of people use those services. Why? Because you solve a need. It's very simple, but it's the bigger challenge. Delivery, delivery, delivery.
Mm-hmm. As you can see, we all so hyped up to geek about this and yes-ending each other. I'll just do a cherry on the top based on what you all have said and your question around even finance and money savings, right? Where are governments who have luxury to kind of scratch their whole kind of legacy system and start with this modular approach? So we've often leveraged digital public good that potentially is free open sourced as a Trojan horse to help that team, minister's team, understand the value of working in this way, and as a way of them to start thinking through this digital capacity building and the service design team as like the core of them kind of switching financing from funding projects to funding products and funding teams. So it has been proven as helpful in that sense versus just like this is going to be free, because over time you want to move to something what Andrea was talking about, the whole modular approach. But yeah, that's just the last cherry I was going to add to your cake.
Thank you so much. I think ending right on German time. And exactly at 13 set, we will end this panel. I want to thank the panelists. I know that Yolanda and Tamara have come from very far, and Andrea and Amar have taken out this weekend on a very nice Saturday, and so have you to be here. So I'm very grateful to each of you and also to our panelists. I think I walk out of this panel with a couple of things. One, that we should talk maybe slightly less and implement more. I got that from Amar. And I think there's also a lot of push towards having the private sector collaborate more with the public sector. There's also the idea of us having the concept of people in the middle of digitization. So I leave you with those thoughts, and please feel free to also meet them outside of this room. So thank you so much. Have a good lunch and a very good day.
Thank you.